Thought we should start with a public service announcement this morning. It's been a wild day. Yesterday was a wild day into the morning hours today. A wild, uncertain day. So, Catholics, be alert, be vigilant. Yesterday in the down in Louisiana, worshippers of the demon of the crescent moon and its followers of the false prophet engaged in a wicked, evil, unspeakable act that made headlines around the world. You have to be at least tangentially aware of what happened involving a motor vehicle in the early hours of New Year's Day. Not as widely reported has been that various, we'll call them devices, the word improvised is often used to describe them, were found near the cathedral and other church properties. Yeah, that happened, and that appeared to have been placed with the intent of going after Catholics attending Mass yesterday. Now, the authorities found these after the thing that everybody heard about happened, and they disposed of them. But what no one really is talking about is that these implements were put there by people who knew that Catholics in North America, unlike other Christian groups, would be going to Mass in large numbers that day. Those events are tied in separately to what happened in Nevada and just a couple of hours ago up in New York. So please be safe, be vigilant, and if the situation isn't resolved by Sunday, follow your bishop's guidance, even if you normally find him someone not to be generally trusted. Let's go on to the main story. The incoming president, just days before the Feast of the Nativity, turned some heads by announcing one of his appointments. And you might, if you've been following that at least a little bit, you know that his appointments, most of them raised eyebrows because they show that he actually means what he says, that he said on the campaign trail. And in this case, it was the ambassador to the Vatican. His choice, rather predictably, riled up the Bergoglians. So we turn to the National Catholic Reporter, because where else would you turn if you want to see how upset Bergoglians are at something? And they give us this headline: 47 nominates papal critic as his Vatican representative. It's probably one of my favorite, least talked about picks that he made, because this is somebody who has made no bones about being very aware of how bad things are in Rome. And the article is written by Christopher White, Vatican correspondent both for the National Catholic Reporter as well as the Tablet in the UK. I believe it's the Tablet in the UK. I might be wrong, but this is their Vatican reporter. So this was a very smart choice on the incoming president's part. So let's get to the article. Quote: the incoming president has nominated a sharp papal critic to serve as his next representative to the Vatican. He announced on December 20th that he would nominate Brian Birch, president of the political advocacy group CatholicVote.org, as his next ambassador to the Holy See. His nomination will now require U.S. Senate confirmation and agreement that the Holy See from the Holy See before he can officially take up his post. Now, let's zoom in on that. The Senate has to confirm him, and the Holy See has to agree to his appointment. This is what this entire story today hinges on. He represented me well during the election, having garnered more Catholic votes than any presidential candidate in history, wrote 47 in a statement. Brian Birch loves his church and the United States. He will make us all proud. His choice of Birch to represent him here in Rome is certain to raise eyebrows inside the Vatican, as he has long expressed criticism of the Francis papacy. Following Francis's 2023 decision to allow priests and to bless individuals and their relationships in James Martin's parody of holy matrimony, Birch blasted the Pope for creating confusion within the Catholic Church. He went on to predict that the now 88-year-old pontiff would not be in office much longer, and that the next Pope must clarify the confusion of the Francis era. Sounds like a good choice to me. On other occasions, he has criticized Francis's government for what he characterized as a pattern of vindictiveness. Birch is an agitator, mostly the opposite of a diplomat, said Stephen Millies, a public theology professor and director of the Bernardin Center at Catholic Theological Union. Yes, the director of the center, named after Cardinal Bernardin, the bishop who invented the term and the seamless garment theology. He's the guy who coined the term seamless garment, and who was found later to have likely been a practitioner of James Martin activities. And if you believe the most infamous part of Windswept House, that opening chapter really happened, well, he is the priest in that scene performing that rite, at least a half of it in the United States. Just to give you an idea who's critiquing this choice here. In this way, I suppose, while Birch will be a good representative of this second 47 administration, his appointment signals what we already know. A difficult time lies ahead for U.S. Vatican relations, Milley told National Catholic Reporter. That 47 shows Birch a partisan political operative instead of a Catholic academic or seasoned politician to represent the United States at the Holy See is very telling, said Massimo Fagioli, a theologian and church historian at Villanova University. He's also the leading voice among the laity in the United States for Francis, without question. He's an Italian, but he said he lives in the United States, is speaks better English than most Americans, and is a absolute 100% loyalist to Francis in ways that he was not to Benedict or to his more conservative predecessors. This is an operative who's been really a campaigner in the trenches for the incoming president. So I think this appointment says something about the kind of relationship that he wants to create with the Vatican, he told the National Catholic Reporter. You get the idea. They really don't like this guy. They don't like him to the point where they actually want Francis to reject the Pope, the pick, and to destroy relations with the United States in the process. Now, these guys being riled up, well, these are the usual suspects, and they're being riled up about this is not a bad thing, since their negative reaction to the pick is, in fact, an endorsement. But it does set the stage for this. You see, a very high-profile Catholic layman who has the ear of Francis has demanded that Francis reject the choice of the ambassador. They want him to refuse to see him, refuse him entry into Vatican City, and refuse to allow him to be the ambassador. That would, again, damage relations between the United States and the Vatican in the ways that they think that his appointment will, at least until the end of Francis's alleged papacy, if not, in fact, well beyond that, depending on who the successor is. If you get a Francis II or John the 24th, as some think Pietro Parolin would choose if he became Pope, then the situation would just continue. And also depending on who follows 47 in the White House after. So we go to, I think, one of the most under-celebrated sources in all of Catholic media for this. We go to Marco Tossati's website. Mr. Tossati is an Italian journalist who has very extensive connections in the Roman Curia. He gets news stories well before anybody else does. We get this headline. English journalist friend of Bergoglio suggests he refuses appointment of the new U.S. ambassador. It would be a terrible idea. I'm going to remind people, the countries that provide the most funds to the Vatican from their laity in their bishops' conferences, and that's where the bishops get most of their money, is from the laity, although they get a lot of contracting dollars from the governments too, which is a scandal by itself. But the two countries that support the Vatican the most financially are the United States and Germany. This is a really terrible idea, what Mr. Iveray is suggesting here, because this is Austin Iveray. Austin Iveray is a professional Francis fan fiction writer. Officially, he's the English language biographer of Francis. He wrote a book called The Great Reformer. It was the first biography of Francis published like a year after he won that conclave. The first edition of that book revealed too much about Francis. It revealed so much about his background in Argentina that future editions of the book pared down the chapters and the contents of those chapters on his activities before, like going back to just when he was a priest. Because it turns out, if you read the first edition, if you read those chapters, you find out that he was involved in some very unsavory things with the government there. If you want an explanation for why he doesn't go back to Argentina, that's probably why. But it's only in the first edition of that book. And Mr. Iveray wrote that book. And he's written several others about Francis since that time. And he is suggesting that Francis refused to accept this nomination for the ambassador. Now, to give you an idea about Mr. Iveray's character, he is a man who seems to have a hobby of reporting Latin masses in his country to the bishop that aren't following Traditionis Custodes to the T. This would include advertising when their mass is. Okay, he has done this numerous times. I've gotten emails from people who had their masses taken from them because of Mr. Iveray. To give you an idea here, here's what he demands from Mr. Tossati's website. Quote, Austin Iveray, British journalist, friend of the Pope. Quote, appointing Brian Birch as U.S. ambassador to the Vatican is an insult. The Pope must refuse it. The nomination of Brian Birch, president of Catholic Vote, as U.S. ambassador to the Holy See, as announced by the incoming president's press office, quote, is an insult to the Vatican and Pope Francis. The Holy See has every right to reject him. This is what Austin Iveray writes on X about his nomination. I would show you those posts on X, but Mr. Iveray has me blocked on X, so I can't. Meanwhile, in a post on Truth Social, the incoming president said that Brian Birch, quote, loves his church in the United States and will make us all proud. He also praised Birch for supporting him and encouraging Catholics to vote for him in 2024. Birch still has to be confirmed by the Senate, but that seems a given. On X, Birch himself said he was, quote, committed to working with leaders within the Vatican and the new administration to advance the dignity of all people and the common good. It should be remembered that the organization Catholic Vote in 2020 used geofencing. This is how you track cell phones and things to identify, as Fausto Gasparoni of ANSA recently recalled, Catholic voters who attended Mass in swing states and target them with ads promoting the incoming president. At the time, Birch defended geofencing as necessary to reach our fellow Catholics in the pews and ensure that our fellow Catholic voters get the facts and hear the truth, not the latest lies peddled by the media. In the previous presidential period, the incoming president appointed in 2017 as ambassador to the Vatican the wife of former Speaker of the House of Representatives Newt Gingrich, Mrs. Callista, an inexperienced person who, however, with a low profile, played a moderating role, avoiding tensions and serious disagreements between Santa Marta and the White House. The announcement of Birch's nomination came hours after the White House briefed reporters on the current president's telephone conversation with Pope Francis and his planned visit to the Vatican in the second week of January 2025. End quote. The previous Vatican ambassador from the United States in the 45 presidency wasn't exactly the best one. It is a change of direction, and I think it's much needed personally. The United States gives an awful lot of money to the Vatican, and we get the Vatican as being at the forefront of promoting great evils in the world today, and it's a shame for all of us Catholics. But if what Mr. Ivray is asking for happened, a refusal to sit the current president, or to his nominee rather, for the ambassadorship, if Francis refused to accept him, relations between the Holy See and the United States would be damaged. And that might be the point here. Since Austin Ivray, professional Francis fan fiction writer, again, the English language biographer for Francis, is a modernist's modernist, and he must be quite pleased that the Vatican deal with Cardinal Zen's homeland and its wicked government, where the underground church was sold out to the state and its fake replacement Catholic Church that places pictures of their dear leader in the place of crucifixes and replaces the parts of the gospel the party objects to with quotes from dear leader and the founders of their hammer and sickle empire. He is pleased with that arrangement. Maybe he's hoping they turn more to them, because ideologically it would fit. And so it's worth reminding ourselves of something here. The Vatican speaks a good game about the need to tone down political rhetoric, the need to not have ideology replace the gospel and all of this. But we see time and time again that they do that themselves. Right now, we have this talk going on in the church in Europe about consensus. And here's the thing about consensus. Aside from consensus being something democratic institutions look for, as opposed to, say, the church, which is hierarchical in nature, it was founded as a hierarchical organization by our blessed Lord himself on the Rock of Peter. When you promote consensus and then say that someone who disagrees with the direction of the church should be denied his post as, say, as the ambassador to the Vatican, from the preeminent power in the secular world, it exposes all that synodal talk about consensus and listening and accompaniment and dialogue and all the rest of their nonsense as the lie that it is. And this is becoming apparent with the way bishops are talking about synodality to the secular press. There's a lot of rhetoric about toning the political atmosphere down, calming things down, and it's all nonsense. It's all nonsense. They don't believe their own words. They don't believe their own rhetoric, especially when you factor in a couple of things. In Germany, there is a conservative party that they have dubbed to be the most evil things ever. We just went through that in the US. Well, the signs are they're going to do really well in their next political contest. And the bishops there are interfering in that by trying to get Catholics to not support them, while they talk about synodality out the other side of their mouth and this dialogue and accompaniment and all this other nonsense. Get another example of this here. So we go here to the Info Vaticana, Spanish website, for this headline: Consensual or Irrelevant Church, Cobo's interview under scrutiny. Now, this is them resharing an article But really, we go to Europa Press, which is how I found this, I found it through Info Vaticana, where Europa Press gave an interview to Jose Cobo, the Archbishop of Madrid. And here he gives this nice sounding talk about dialogue and accompaniment and all the rest of it. And if I can get it to translate here, because for some reason it is not willing to translate. So let's refresh the screen. There it is. They give us this headline. Jose Cobo, Archbishop of Madrid, on polarization. The church, we have to support consensus more than ever. Yeah, that's great. More than ever. Yes, the church is polarized. And yes, that's a bad thing. We should all be united under the gospel and under the papacy, but at present there are forces in the Vatican, led by the man who the world accepts as Pope, who are opposed to the actual gospel, and they promote a new religion, one that replaces the gospel with a false gospel. What the Archbishop of Madrid wants is submission to the new religion. And you see this impacting everything, including the relations the Vatican has now with, say, ideological opponents outside the Vatican, including leaders of nation states. From the article, quote, the Cardinal Archbishop of Madrid and the Vice President of the Spanish Episcopal Conference, Jose Cobo, has expressed concern about the increase in polarization in politics and society during this year, and that is coming to an end, and has pointed out that the Church has to support consensus more than ever. I believe that right now the proposal we have to make first is that politics is not an abstract idea. It is made by politicians, and politicians are good people. Politicians are people. And I believe that we have to support people so they make good politics. We have to support consensus in the church more than ever. And consensus is made with people and with sit-ins and with listenings, Cobo stressed in an interview with Europa Press. The Archbishop also stressed the need to support ethics in the midst of politics and not just ideology in general, and called, as Pope Francis says, for recovering civic kindness. This is done through people and through meetings, and if we can do it from the church, we will certainly support everything that can be done and everything that is asked of us, he said. He revealed that the church in Madrid has held meetings with politicians of different tendencies this year, with those responsible from the world of economics and with people from the world of culture, and with that vocation that the church wants to have of setting the table so that people can talk. We all owe ourselves to a reevaluation of politics, also from the fundamental values, not only from ideologies or tension, Cobo stressed, while regretting that the media, quote, sometimes spurs on this confrontation, end quote. Great. That is the talk coming from them. While there is open talk of, say, not accepting the United States as new ambassador to the Vatican because he has the wrong politics. He has the wrong ecclesiastical politics, which is really the key point here. All this talk of synodality and consensus and all this stuff is fine as long as you get with the program. That is the undeniable takeaway from what they promote. You have to get with the program. You cannot resist. You have to just submit. Submit, submit, submit. This is all this is. I'll remind you that they are building a new religion. They've said as much. The ecclesiology of the church before Vatican II is no longer compatible with the synodal church, their new synodal church, to use their own language. And we see it in public expressions of apostasy and just grotesque art displays that they put in parishes, and a lot of other talk about setting aside things the church has always taught as sin and making it more acceptable in the name of inclusion and dialogue and mercy and all the rest of this nonsense. It's one of those things that really shows how bad things are right now in the state of the church. But it won't last that way forever. Things will get better. The state of the church will get better. It has to. It can't not get better. We will see a resurgence in piety and the rest. It will come with time. And it could very well be happening right now. There is a shift in the culture in the entire West away from this acceptance of sin and this godlessness and things to at least people paying some more lip service with their mouth to Christ and the rest. And you see this manifesting in the church and increased numbers of young people, especially young men, attracted to traditional forms of worship, whether it's in the Eastern rites or the traditional Mass. You see those things, and they are a sign of things changing. Will that manifest itself in the next conclave that gives us the next pope? Your guess on that one is as good as mine. I am not that hopeful about that, but I've been wrong before. So we shall see, assuming that happens this year, which I don't think it will. But their highest value in the Vatican is this synodality nonsense, which is really just a way of ensuring that their revolution in the church is never undone. Francis was promised us, as has his mouthpieces, that the purpose of Francis's papacy is to change the church forever, to make it so they can't go back. And that is the purpose of synodality and this consensus building. This consensus building is part of that decentralization of authority from bishops and the Pope and the elevating of the laity into the decision making process. That's what this is about, consensus building. And that doesn't sound maybe too bad to people who live in a bubble and think that most Catholics accept what the church has taught on morality and things. But when you look at the actual data, we find that most Catholics reject the Catholic Church's moral authority, which makes you wonder at what point have they individual Catholics who take that position have crossed the line into actual open apostasy. Curious what you might think about this in the comments, please. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It certainly does help. So does sharing this on social media. That helps too. And as always, pray for the church and stay alert out there, folks. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.